Clay Ferraro is on the Toyota of Hollywood hotline. Shop hundreds of Toyotas indoors in one of America's largest showrooms, Toyota of Hollywood on 441 between Hollywood and Sheridan. You watch Clay on Local 10. Clay, what do we do here? We have a lot of questions that are going to need to be answered when it comes to the Heat, but we're coming off just a real painful drubbing last night. Do we even start with a post-mortem, or do we have to let this loss kind of sink in?
Well, I think we have to start with an all-time bad transition. Man, that was something.
Well, that was done intentionally, Clay. That was done intentionally. That's the fun of that.
Well, you couldn't get through it without laughing. That was my favorite part.
Megadeth.
Nothing says joy like Megadeth. That was amazing.
Doug Plagens will be joyful if he wins Megadeth tickets.
Oh, I'm sure. I would say that I think people had kind of already come to peace with the fact the season was going to end something like this.
But that way?
One win and yeah. I mean, once Jimmy got hurt, and you don't have Terry Rozier, and Duncan Robinson is trying to play without a back. I mean, yeah, you kind of. I think if you're being realistic, you kind of, at some point you really, despite what Spo says, at some point you don't have enough, and they didn't. They barely had enough to field a roster of NBA players at that point. I think Patty Mills was the sixth man last night. I mean, that's kind of where you're at. It's a shame, but so I think they're. I don't know. I know certainly from my perspective, I'm ready to look forward to the offseason and see where they go from here.
Clay, 88 twice, 84 once, 94 in another. All four losses, they did not get to 100. I don't know what we're going to do. I told Solana.
Once Tyler Herro is back, once he's not injured.
No, it's not that.
He was out there? Oh, I had no idea.
The drag into the mud approach, the let's drag them into the mud. I don't think teams nowadays can be drug in the mud and not score 100 points to beat a team. We got to get offense generated.
Well, Channing, and I think that's what was disappointing about a couple of the games. And look, I didn't expect it to go beyond 5. I thought the fact they got one in Boston was kind of cool. But, they held them, what was it? Two or three games that they held them to under 110 points. Like, you do that against a team like Boston, and you should find a way to get enough offense to win. And I do think it speaks to how much they relied on Jimmy Butler to get into the lane, get fouled, which, by the way, was a problem in the second half of the season too. Once the NBA kind of changed their emphasis on, not allowing guys to go out of their ways to draw fouls, but also look, their most reliable half-court offensive set in many ways was when you had Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson up there and doing some of the dribble handoff stuff. And I just think that once Duncan got hurt and you didn't have Jimmy and you didn't have Terry Rozier, who had kind of become the guy that bailed you out in one-on-one situations, the offense wasn't there. I agree with you. I think you need more offense, but I also think that the sheer volume of injuries, like your options were just gone by the end of the playoffs.
Clay, I'm not going to sit here like a lot of Heat fans are doing and blame this series loss on Tyler Herro. Not to say that, I'm excusing some of the effort and performances that we saw in this series, but I don't think it was realistic that Tyler was going to win you this series without all the guys who are missing, like you just mentioned. But overall, you come away from this series feeling what about Tyler Herro? Because to me, it was clear to me that the Celtics prioritized neutralizing his offense, and outside of one game where everybody was perfect for Miami, he was neutralized. They succeeded in doing that, and any question of him being a 1 or a 2 on a title contending team, to me, quickly dissipated after this series.
But, if the question is where am I coming out of the series, I'm right where I was before the series started. I mean, that's kind of how I've always viewed him. I think he's in his best role when he's coming off the bench and he can kind of be that instant offense. And I hope it would have happened if they had everybody else healthy.
You blipped out there for a second. We lost the
I
signal.
blipped out.
But now you're back.
Oh, okay. Okay. But who knows what would happen if you had everybody else healthy? Maybe you do eventually bring him off the bench and he's comfortable with that role again, even though he doesn't want to be. But I don't, he's not a number one or a number two. I think he's more of an instant offense guy off the bench that when he's hot, you let him have quarter and closing minutes as well.
Clay Ferraro is with us. What do you do with this? So there's going to be this postmortem at the actual facility with the front office people and figure out, do you follow the Barry Jackson route, which is to blow it up? Do you try to tweak it? Are you stuck with it? Maybe. But I wonder, does it start maybe with realigning their thoughts regarding the regular season? Because can't you, if you really try to do a postmortem on the season, can't you kind of come to this conclusion that the notion of just skating through the regular season, and if you end up in the play-in, you end up in the play-in, maybe that needs to be addressed. Maybe that's something that can actually be addressed with tangible positive results.
No, I agree. I don't think that you can rely on, and by the way, I think if you go back and listen closely to what Pat Riley said last offseason, he did not come off as somebody who was like over the moon thrilled with the finals appearance. He was somebody who was like, okay, we got there this season. We're going to run it back, but let's see. You have to be honest with yourself and see, okay, is this team as good as the team that made the NBA finals, or are they more like the 8th seed that was going into the postseason? It was frankly late in the fourth quarter against the Bulls. We didn't even know if they'd make the postseason last season. So then you get this coming season coming around and you look a lot more like the team that almost missed the playoffs the previous year. So I don't think Pat Riley is going into this as married to the idea that you have to bring back this core as I think people seem to believe. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't ultimately do that if you think it's the best option, but I think they're going to explore every possibility. And to me, that means, all right, are we sure that we give Jimmy Butler the 2-year, $110 million extension? Or do we roll the dice and see if he plays, if you keep him on the 1 year? Or do you look at, I think all of these things have to be on the table. Every single thing has to be on the table beyond trading Bam Adebayo, unless it's for a Luka Doncic level type player, which isn't going to happen.
Clay, and I don't want to just be upset by this. Jimmy Butler got in the league in 2011, 6-time NBA All-Star, All-NBA second team, 4-time All-NBA third team, 5-time NBA All-Defensive second team, Most Improved Player 2015, NBA Steals Leader 2021. I had to read that to say there is no championships under Jimmy's belt, multiple teams. Jimmy's taking you there, but Jimmy's not going to win you a championship. Jimmy is your number one. You're not walking away with a ring next year.
And Channing, I think that's even more true now. I really think in 2020, if Goran and Bam don't get hurt, the way Jimmy was playing, I think you could have done it. And there was a chance last year if Jimmy hadn't gotten hurt. I thought this year there were real, even if they were subtle, there were real signs of decline. And I think especially when he would attack the rim, which was really his bread and butter. You combine that with this new emphasis on officiating, and I think you're 100% right. So what does that mean? Well, can you trade Jimmy for someone who's potentially a number one scorer but isn't quite as good of an all-around player? You know what I mean? Those are the types of conversations that you're going to have if you're talking about improving this roster to catch Boston. Because I don't think just going into next year and saying, hey, let's try to be the 3 or 4 seed and see. That's not how Pat Riley operates. That's never been how he operates. And so I do think that they're going to explore every single avenue and hey, it may be something that hurts. And, perhaps the biggest trade in the history of this organization was one that a lot of fans were hurt by in the moment when you traded Lamar Odom and Caron Butler for Shaq. But those are the types of moves that you have to entertain. You might lose a fan favorite. You may lose a Jimmy Butler. You may lose some of these young guys that you had really grown attached to. But that's the only way that I think this roster finds a way to to get back and get where the Heat want to go.
Which one of these arguments would ring more true? Jimmy Butler standing in Pat Riley's office saying, "You didn't give me enough pieces. We were very close, but you didn't give me enough." Or Pat Riley staring at Jimmy Butler saying, "You came here to lead us to a championship. We gave you all the tools you needed. You didn't do it."
Which one is more accurate? It's hard to pick between those two, but since you asked me to do it, I would probably say the Pat Riley argument is closer to true, because I don't necessarily agree with the idea that there was just nothing around Jimmy. I think they did a good job of building around him. I understand there was disappointment with not getting Damian Lillard, but I do think, to your original point a couple of questions ago, man, if you have one or two better games out of Jimmy Butler, you're potentially the 4 or the 5, maybe the 6, but probably the 4 or the 5, and you're playing Orlando or Cleveland. I mean, that's you need that, and then Jimmy doesn't get hurt in the play-in game, and so I think there would have been enough for this team to get into the playoffs and give themselves a much better chance with, and then see where you're at. But because, to your original point, you kind of messed around a little bit in the regular season, and Jimmy Butler sat out a lot of these games. I do think that that's an issue, and I do think it's one that you look back, and if the championship is the ultimate goal and it's all that matters, then yeah, you can look at it as a disappointment. But I do think on the flip side, you have to be very appreciative and recognize
no doubt
that Jimmy did. So I think there's a middle ground there that, and middle ground.
This is not a KD and Phoenix situation. This is a guy overperforming, in my opinion. I'm just curious, Crowder, what do you think? We're out of time. What do you think, Crowder? Pat Riley looks at Butler and says, "We gave you all the tools. You just couldn't get us across the finish line." Or Jimmy looks at Pat and says, "Man, if you had just given me a little bit more, we could have done it."
I think it's Pat talking to Jimmy, because Jimmy's not that. He's not built like that. They thought he was built like that, but Jimmy's not built like that.
What about you, Solana?
No, I think it's I think it's a mixture of both, but I think it's more Jimmy.
It's splitting hairs because they both have delivered.
But even Clay, Pat Riley would probably concede the best piece they got for Jimmy Butler over his 5-year era here was Kyle Lowry, who wasn't healthy in either of those 2 postseason runs. And then Terry Rozier would probably the second best, and he was unhealthy and couldn't play at all in this postseason, even without Jimmy Butler. I have a feeling Pat sits back and look, the Dame stuff, like there's context to all this. So I'm not saying this on Pat Riley, but I think even he would concede, yeah, I mean, if perhaps we had gotten you a little bit more help, we'd be having different conversations.
Yeah, and I think, I know you're out of time. Show me the move that Riley should have made. I think that's the thing that
right.
When we have this conversation, I would need to know what's the move, because it ain't Bradley Beal. I think we've seen how that worked out, and the game thing, Cronin was never dealing with them. So no, but yeah, there's a lot both ways.
Should have kept Goran. Said it when it happened. Should have kept Goran.
There you go.
All right.
There you go. We can all agree on that.
See you, Clay.
Later, guys.